In any game, there will always be desirable choices. What controllers to use, skills to level up, and weapons to equip are all examples of choices that can affect a player's performance in-game. This, of course, applies to guns in shooters. And in the pistol category, there's always one particular handgun that ends up being the top choice. Of course, I'm talking about the FN-57. But first, a word about merch. Are you interested in civilian use only merch? Have your say in what you want. Click the link in the description to fill out the survey. Thank you for your attention, and back to the video. There is one cartridge that's almost synonymous with the phrase handgun round, 9x19mm. Designed in 1901, the round saw use in both world wars, and was eventually adopted by NATO as its standard pistol caliber. During the late 20th century, the biggest threat to NATO was the Soviet Union. So, there was an interest in staying ahead of the Soviet Union in the arms race. This, of course, extended to small arms. Around the 1980s, it became apparent that Soviet soldiers were being equipped with body armor, and while NATO rifle rounds were able to defeat this armor relatively easily, the 9mm round was almost completely ineffective against this armor. So in 1990, NATO began seeking a replacement for 9mm. NATO set out a list of requirements for this new handgun round. It needed to be more accurate, have a longer effective range, and have more ballistic capability than 9mm. And it also needed to be capable of defeating body armor. For most companies, this was a broad wish list that seemed unachievable. So, almost all of them did not pursue NATO's request. But there was one that took on the task, the Belgian company FN Herstal. They immediately began development on a new cartridge that would meet all of NATO's requirements. What they came up with was the 5.7x28mm round. This was a round that was smaller, lighter, and traveled significantly faster than the 9mm bullet. And most significantly, the 5.7 round was capable of penetrating level 3A soft body armor. In addition to this new ammunition, NATO had also requested two new firearms that would fire the new round: a shoulder-fired personal defense weapon and a handgun. Both also had specific requirements, with the handgun needing to weigh about 700 grams, have a magazine capacity of no less than 20 rounds, and be compact enough for a user to carry at all times. FN Herstal designed both weapons. The personal defense weapon became what we now know as the P90, and the handgun, the FN-57. In 1995, FN Herstal announced the development of the 5.7, and it was officially released in 1998. Compared to other handguns of its time, the 5.7 was very advanced. Attributes such as its heavy use of polymer and hidden hammer made it look like a pistol from the future. But its defining trait was its 20-round magazine. Most 9mm handguns at the time could hold around 15 rounds in their mags, so being able to store 20 in a handgun mag that was about the same size was a significant improvement. All these attributes looked good on paper, and the 5.7 round seemed promising. So, a push to officially convert to the new bullet began. Beginning in 2002, NATO tested the 5.7x28 round to see if it was capable of replacing the 9mm round. They also compared it to the German-made 4.6x30 round, a similar lightweight bullet meant to pierce body armor and was intended for use in compact personal defense weapons. In the end, NATO concluded that the 5.7x28 round was superior to both the 4.6x30 and 9mm cartridge. But Germany and other countries rejected this conclusion. So, the 5.7x28 round did not end up being adopted as a NATO round. However, that didn't stop organizations and individuals from adopting the round and their subsequent weapons. The 5.7 pistol itself boasted several key advantages, the aforementioned 20-round mag being one of the most significant. But there were other benefits to the handgun as well. The 5.7x28 round has significantly less recoil than 9mm. While it's hard to quantify, Some users describe it as being about 40% less recoil. This makes the weapon much easier to shoot and keep on target. With most handgun rounds, multiple shots on target are needed to stop a threat, so the reduction in recoil is a tangible one. Heavier pistols generally recoil less than lighter ones. Generally. But with the inherent light recoil of the 5.7 round, the 5.7 handgun was able to use a significant amount of polymer throughout its construction, though parts such as the barrel, slide, and internal components are made of steel. This serves to lighten the pistol significantly. A fully loaded 5.7 weighs only about 1.5 pounds. Having a light recoiling pistol that itself is light makes for a handgun that's easy to shoot and convenient to carry. The combination of a new cartridge with a slew of supposed benefits and a state-of-the-art handgun from a reputable company meant that there was significant interest from both military and law enforcement. And while it's never reached the popularity of some other pistols, there are a number of organizations that issue the handgun to this day. But how effective is the 5.7? Though not related to the pistol itself, the most common point of contention when discussing this handgun is the 5.7 cartridge, specifically its armor-piercing capability. There have been many debates over how effective the 5.7 round really is. Some believe that it is the mini armor-penetrating round that it was marketed to be, while others question if it really is any improvement over the 9mm round. And while there have been many tests on the armor-penetrating capability of the 5.7 round, it's difficult to find consensus on how effective it is. This discussion has been further convoluted by the fact that 5.7 ammunition sold to the civilian market does not have the same armor-piercing capability that military and law enforcement 5.7 rounds are capable of. It's likely that some lackluster first impressions were due to individuals not realizing that the civilian ammo is not armor-penetrating. But despite this fact, the 5.7 round, and subsequently the 5.7 handgun, have been the subject of much controversy in discussions of gun control, mostly due to its perceived effectiveness. A number of gun control organizations have opposed the selling of the 5.7 to the civilian market, the belief being that all 5.7 ammunition is capable of armor penetration. Despite the demonstrable fact that civilian 5.7 ammunition is not armor penetrating, legislation has been introduced multiple times in the US Congress to attempt to ban the 5.7 handgun from being sold to civilians. Due to the amount of misinformation spread on civilian 5.7 ammunition, FN Herstal released a fact sheet that reiterated the civilian ammunition's inability to penetrate armor. Nevertheless, the idea that the 5.7 handgun was a compact weapon that could take on armored hostiles was the prevalent belief for a long time. And with proper ammunition, that certainly is a possibility. Other than armor penetration, the 5.7 cartridge and 5.7 handgun do offer some advantages over a 9mm pistol. The combination of the 5.7 round with the proprietary blowback system in the handgun means that the 5.7 pistol has very low recoil. Putting multiple rounds on target with a 5.7 is not a difficult task. The 5.7 cartridge also travels much faster than the 9mm round, meaning that it's more effective at longer distances. And of course, the 20-round magazine is substantially more than most semi-auto handguns, even by modern standards. Whether it's worth replacing a 9mm handgun with a 5.7 is a separate discussion, but there's no doubt that the 5.7 is an effective handgun in its own right. There have been many variants of the 5.7, and they've evolved as modern handguns have changed over time. The initial model was a no-frills double-action handgun, but the newest 5.7 is a single-action handgun that is capable of having an optic and flashlight attached. Still, perhaps due to cost and inconclusive results on its performance, the 5.7 remains a relatively rare sight in the real world, but that certainly does not apply to games. Its notoriety in real life and futuristic appearance means that the 5.7 has shown up in many video games, and while most would not consider it the best choice in the real world, video games are a different case. In fact, in almost every game it's featured in, the 5.7 is usually the best handgun to choose from. So, Why is a handgun that is somewhat exotic the premier choice in so many games? While ballistics is a complex topic in real life, it's usually simply depicted in video games. Bigger bullets do more damage, while smaller bullets do less. Typically, most video games depicting the 5.7 are relatively faithful to the real thing. The mags hold 20 rounds, the recoil is low, and in games where body armor exists, the 5.7 is capable of shooting through it. Usually, games only differentiate handgun damage between substantially different calibers. So in most games, the 5.7 and 9mm handguns deal similar amounts of damage. But with the 5.7 having a mag capacity of 20 and lower recoil, it's quite often a direct upgrade to 9mm handguns in games. Like real life, handguns in games are typically used at close distances. In these situations, more ammo is better. And with more and more games implementing body armor, the 5.7 becomes very useful for punching through and taking out an adversary, typically with more penetration than what the real handgun is capable of. Because of these reasons, the 5.7 is often the top pistol choice no matter what game it appears in. A low recoiling handgun that has 20 rounds to work with is hard to beat as a secondary weapon. In games like Counter-Strike, Payday 2, and Escape from Tarkov, the 5.7 is a secondary weapon capable of taking down the most heavily armored opponents. It can be somewhat unrealistic, but it makes them very popular in these games. But interestingly, its most prominent role in a video game is one where its implementation arguably doesn't make much sense. In the Splinter Cell series, the titular spy Sam Fisher uses the FN 5.7 as his main weapon. While it's undeniably cool, it's an odd choice for him. The high velocity of the 5.7 round means that it's quite loud when compared to other handgun rounds, even when suppressed. Subsonic 5.7 ammunition is available, but its armor-piercing capability is significantly diminished, given that armor penetration is usually a function of high velocity. A 5.7 round traveling at subsonic speeds will be significantly less effective against armor than a round traveling faster than sound. A 5.7 round traveling supersonic would be much more effective against armor, but would also be much louder. While sound isn't usually a consideration when choosing a main weapon, it certainly would be an important factor for a deniable ops government agent. It's a weird choice, and an unlikely one for any real equivalent to Sam Fisher. However, it's looked cool enough for it to be his main weapon throughout the entire series. These days, the 5.7 sits in an odd place. More than 20 years later, the 5.7 cartridge was finally adopted by NATO in 2021, though this hasn't resulted in a significant increase in the round being used in military or law enforcement. And for a long time, the FN 5.7 was the only handgun that fired the 5.7 round. Where the 5.7 cartridge has seen some increase in usage is in the civilian market. In recent years, some other companies have begun making their own handguns that fire the 5.7 round. While it's too early to say whether these designs are on par or superior to the FN 5.7, they certainly are innovative in their own way, and it's definitely served to garner more interest in the 5.7 round. But when it comes to games, the FN 5.7 handgun still reigns supreme, and remains a popular choice among gamers. Time will tell whether or not other handguns surpass the 5.7 in gaming prowess. Handguns are a staple of video games. Some are unremarkably practical, while others are effortlessly stylish. The FN 5.7 is one of the few that excels at both, and for that reason, it's the handgun of choice whenever it appears in games.